Jake stared at the group, unloading supplies with a rising fury he rarely allowed to show. His ranch was his sanctuary, passed down through generations, a place where hard work meant something and respect was earned, not demanded. And now this woman, who couldn't tell a shovel from a spade, had waltzed onto his land with a fake permit and a wedding vision built on arrogance. He called the sheriff immediately. While he waited, Karen paced near the barn, pointing at imagined decor spots, and asking her assistant to note the sun's angle for golden hour. She was entirely unmoved by Jake's outrage, acting as if his voice was background noise to her high society fantasy. When he told the crew to pack up, Karen interrupted smoothly. "They're not leaving. They have a legal right to be here," she claimed, flashing the fake permit again. "This is community action for the greater good. Your ranch is rural use designated, which qualifies it for temporary community benefit under Local Code 43. Jake narrowed his eyes. That wasn't just a light, was a twisted misreading of an old agricultural co-op clause. And it wasn't something any ordinary citizen would know. Karen had clearly done her homework, or had someone do it for her. The decorators, realizing something was wrong, began hesitating. Jake's tone had changed. He wasn't yelling, but his voice had dropped into that quiet, dangerous calm, the kind that meant things were about to go south fast. "You got 60 seconds to start packing," he told the crew. "Next time I speak, it'll be to a deputy." Karen rolled her eyes. "You rancher types are all the same, clinging to land like it makes you powerful. This wedding is happening with or without your blessing." Sirens sounded in the distance. Karen's expression shifted again, lips pressing into a thin, calculated smile. "Ah," she said, as if she'd expected the law to back her up. "Good. Finally, someone with authority." But when the sheriff pulled up and stepped out of his cruiser, Karen's plan began to crack. Sheriff Bill Harwood wasn't just the law, he was Jake's childhood friend. He tipped his hat, took one look at the scene, and knew something was off. Jake handed over the permit. Bill examined it, jaw tightening. "This signature isn't mine. In the zoning code referenced here, that's not even in effect anymore." Karen's charm kicked in like clockwork. "Sheriff, there must be a misunderstanding," we were told. "This was approved. Our decorators were contracted weeks ago. You're telling me someone approved the use of Jake Monroe's private land for an unauthorized event?" Harwood's tone went flat. "Without his consent?" Karen hesitated. "It's complicated." "No," Harwood said, folding the permit. "It's illegal." He turned to the crew. "Pack up your trespassing. And next time, make sure your permits come from real people." The crew scrambled. Karen didn't move. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Jake under her breath, eyes full of venom. "You don't know who I know." Jake didn't blink. "Lady, I know exactly who you are now." And as the last of the trucks rolled out and dust settled behind Karen's retreating SUV, Jake felt something he hadn't in years. A fight was coming, and it wasn't over yet. The morning after the sheriff cleared out the decorators, Jake Monroe stood at the edge of his front porch, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug, eyes fixed on the dirt road that led toward Glenhaven Estates. It was quiet, too quiet. He knew Karen Wilford wasn't the type to accept a clean defeat. She hadn't left angry, she'd left calculating, and that was worse. Sure enough, by noon, a sleek black SUV rolled past his cattle gate. It didn't stop, just slowed down long enough for the driver to stare. The windows were tinted, but Jake didn't need to see the face to know it was her. That was her waist linking, just close enough to taunt, but never quite stepping fully back into the ring. Not yet. Jake headed into town. His first stop was the county office. He slapped the permit Karen had used down on the front desk of the zoning department. "Tell me this is a joke," he said. "Pam?" The town clerk, a no-nonsense woman with glasses hanging from a silver chain, took one look and raised an eyebrow. "This has my boss's old signature," she muttered. "But he retired 3 years ago. And this stamp? We haven't used this seal since 2019. Jake crossed his arms. "So it's fake." "Oh, it's not just fake. It's deliberately fake," Pam said, pulling out a filing cabinet. "Whoever did this knew just enough to make it look real to someone unfamiliar. But they messed up the zoning language and used an outdated form. Sloppy, but dangerous." Pam scanned it into her system. "We'll report it. If this gets deeper, you might want to call a lawyer." He already planned to. Later that afternoon, Jake sat across from Aaron Daly, a local attorney who handled everything from property disputes to real estate fraud. She reviewed the permit, shook her head, and whistled low. "Someone's trying to play chess with you, Jake. Problem is, they think you're a pawn." Jake leaned back. "Can we sue?" "Oh, absolutely. But let's hold off. Right now, we need to box her in. Get her to overstep again and catch it clean." Jake nodded. That shouldn't take long. He was right. That night, Jake got a knock on his door. Not from Karen, but from a neighbor who lived on the far side of Glenhaven. A quiet man named Bill Townsend. Someone Jake had barely spoken to in years. "She came by our house," Bill said, glancing over his shoulder like he expected someone to be listening. "Karen told us she was working with the city to reclaim underutilized land for community events. Mentioned your ranch specifically. Said it was being reassigned as temporary public use. I didn't buy it, but others might." Jake's gut clenched. This wasn't just a fake permit anymore. Karen was spreading a full-blown lie across the neighborhood, pretending there was legal authority behind her fantasy. 2 hours later, Jake got a call from a friend on the Glenhaven HOA. Board, an anonymous one. The board had been sold a vision, a luxury countryside wedding, on a picturesque ranch, a storybook scene. Karen had pitched it as pro-viewed, even claiming Jake had verbally agreed months ago. He hadn't, and now her lie was unraveling fast. Jake posted a detailed message online, explaining the situation. He included pictures of the forged permit, a statement from Pam at the county office, and a clear warning. Anyone stepping foot on his land without permission would face legal consequences. Most of the responses were supportive, but one anonymous comment stood out. Careful, Monroe. Not everyone plays fair, and Karen never plays to lose. Jake stared at the screen, jaw tightening. She was just getting started. And now, so was he. The following morning, Jake awoke not to the crow of a rooster or the bark of his cattle dog, but to the sound of tires grinding gravel just beyond his barn. Again, he grabbed his boots, threw on a jacket, and stepped outside only to find a small group of well-dressed people standing near his corral, snapping photos and pointing at the terrain like tourists surveying a film set. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jake called out, his voice sharp and unwavering. A woman jumped, clutching her purse. "Oh, we were told we could. Preview the venue." Jake's boots hit the dirt fast. "Preview what venue?" The woman looked puzzled. "The Glenhaven country wedding site. We were shown photos yesterday. That red barn's the one, isn't it?" Jake's face darkened. "That red barn belongs to me. You're trespassing." They backed off, embarrassed and confused, murmuring apologies before hurrying into a BMW parked under his oak trees. The last thing the woman said before slamming the door was, "But the HOA said this was a community asset." Jake's fists clenched. This wasn't some desperate act anymore. This was a strategy, and Karen had clearly been laying the groundwork. For weeks, if not longer, he stormed back into the house, opened his laptop, and started digging. And what he found almost made him laugh. Almost. Karen had built a full digital brochure on the Glenhaven HOA website. It featured high-resolution photos of his ranch, including his private barn, his stables, and even his irrigation pond, captioned "Ideal backdrop for wedding photos." There were even dates listed for upcoming events, including one titled Madison and Matthew's Dream Ceremony, private VIP guest list. His own land, advertised like a damn event space. He scrolled further and found a document, Community Resource Planning Proposal. It was marked as pre-approved draft, and it read like a con artist's playbook. The proposal referenced obscure zoning language, cited old neighborhood annexation discussions, and even included emails from a liaison at the county. But Jake recognized the formatting immediately. They were doctored. A bad copy-paste job. Legal fiction pretending to be real policy. That's when he noticed something chilling. In one of the drafts, Karen had annotated a map. A boundary line, clearly drawn, stretched past the official HOA property and right through Jake's land. His barn was inside the border, so was half of his back pasture. She was trying to redraw the lines. Jake picked up his phone and called Aaron, his lawyer. "She's not just lying," he said. "She's engineering a paper trail to take what isn't hers." "Let her," Aaron replied calmly. "Every document she fakes, every map she forges, adds weight to the case. But we need more. A confrontation won't work. We need a trigger." Jake knew exactly what that meant. He had to let her feel like she was winning, that she was safe. He didn't like it, but he agreed. Later that afternoon, Jake saw another post on the HOA website. Community hearing scheduled, petition to formalize shared land agreement. It was happening in 3 days. On HOA grounds, open to all residents, and Jake wasn't invited, but he planned to be there, and this time, he wasn't walking in alone. He forwarded everything. He had screenshots, permit images, maps to the sheriff, and to Aaron. And then he waited, because if Karen wanted a war of documents and drama, he'd give it to her, but she'd never see the ambush coming. 3 days passed in quiet unease, like the calm before a dust storm. Jake didn't sleep much. The nights were too long, the thoughts too loud. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined strangers standing in his barn, sipping champagne beside his hay bales, calling it theirs. The morning of the HOA hearing came, and Jake wasn't riding in alone. Erin Daly arrived in her battered Jeep, boots on, briefcase in hand. She didn't look like a lawyer from the city, no polished heels or pinstripe suit. She looked like someone who knew how to win on dirt roads, and that's exactly what Jake needed. They drove together to Glenhaven Estates, the neighborhood of oversized houses and pristine sidewalks where grass grew the same height on every lawn, and nothing ever looked out of place. Except for the truth. Jake parked outside the clubhouse where the meeting was already in motion. Inside, residents filled chairs like an audience waiting for theater to begin. Some looked confused, others smug. A few wore expressions that said they knew something was wrong, but they hadn't dared say it out loud yet. At the front of the room stood Karen Wilford. She was polished, proud, and glowing with confidence. Her voice rang out like a stage actress addressing the crowd. We believe this shared land initiative will strengthen our community. For too long, the neighboring ranch has been underutilized. The Glenhaven Wedding Project will not only celebrate love, it will showcase the beauty of our expanded community vision. There it was again, expanded community. Jake's land, wrapped in a lie. A few board members nodded. One even clapped. Karen smiled, and for a moment, it seemed like the whole room had bought in, until the door opened. Jake and Aaron stepped in together. The room fell silent. Karen's smile vanished like smoke. I didn't see your name on the list, she said. Voice icy. Jake kept walking. Funny, I didn't see my land's name on your deed either. Karen opened her mouth, but Aaron beat her to it. We're here to provide a factual correction before any vote occurs. What you're attempting is not only illegal, it's dangerous. Aaron approached the front, pulling documents from her briefcase and setting them down for the board. This is a notarized statement from the county zoning office, confirming that Jake Monroe's ranch is private, not part of Glenhaven, and not subject to your HOA jurisdiction. This is a fraud alert filed with the town clerk regarding a forged permit distributed by Ms. Wilford. Karen laughed a dry, desperate sound. This is a community matter. The HOA voted to support this initiative, and the HOA said sharply, does not override property law, zoning boundaries, or criminal statutes. You've impersonated county officials, distributed forged permits, and made misrepresentations to these residents. That's fraud, Karen. That's a felony. Murmurs spread through the room. One board member leaned forward, eyes wide. Karen, you told us this was approved. Karen's eyes darted between them, searching for a foothold. I was told by a liaison that this was in process. There is no liaison. Aaron snapped. We checked, and the documents, they've already been submitted as evidence. The sheriff's office is opening an investigation. Karen took a step back, her face palling, and just when Jake thought the moment had reached its peak, someone stood up in the back. Bill Townsend, the quiet neighbor who'd warned Jake earlier. He raised his phone. I recorded her, he said. The day she came to our door, said she was taking the ranch, said she had the power to claim it for the good of Glenhaven. I've got the whole thing. Karen turned, frozen. The room broke into chaos. The meeting was over, but for Karen, the fallout had only begun. Karen Wilford didn't speak as she left the HOA hearing. She didn't shout, didn't protest. She just walked out stiffly, face blank. Sunglasses pulled over her eyes, even though it was nearly dusk. But behind that silence brewed something toxic and dangerous. Jake knew it wasn't over. People like Karen didn't crawl away quietly. They regrouped, and when they had nothing left to lose, they got reckless. The next morning, the air was unusually still. Jake was out behind the barn, patching a fence post split from last week's windstorm, when his cattle dog, Scout, started barking toward the driveway. Jake wiped his brow and turned, expecting a delivery, or maybe Aaron with more legal documents. What he got instead was flashing lights. 3 sheriff's cruisers rolled up fast, tires crunching gravel with urgency. Doors flew open. Deputies spilled out, hands near their holsters, eyes sharp. One of them shouted, Jake Monroe. Jake raised both hands in confusion. Yeah, what's going on? Step back from the barn, sir. We received a 911 call, said there were threats being made, that you were armed, aggressive, interfering with an event. Jake blinked. What event? Another deputy approached, calmer than the others. Caller claimed you were threatening a wedding rehearsal crew, said you had a rifle and were refusing to let them leave. Jake gestured to the open land behind him. Does it look like there's a wedding happening here? The lead deputy scanned the area. No vehicles, no people, just fence lines, hay bales, and the distant shuffle of cows. Jake stepped forward, slowly, still keeping his voice even. I've got cameras. Security footage. You're not going to find what she said because it didn't happen. The deputy raised a hand to his radio. Dispatch, verify 911 source. A minute passed. Then a voice crackled back. Call came from Glenhaven Estates. Registered to Karen Wilford. Silence settled between them like a thick fog. Jake exhaled, jaw clenched. She sent you here as a stunt. The older deputy looked away, embarrassed. Looks that way. Jake shook his head. She tried to stage an arrest to make me look like the aggressor. Probably had someone filming it. The bushes. The younger deputy glanced toward the hedgerow. I'll check for cameras, but there were none. Either Karen had hoped the cops would escalate, or she was just trying to rattle Jake to humiliate him publicly. Either way, it failed. Deputy Harper, the lead, stepped close. Jake, I'm sorry. We had to treat the call seriously, but this was a false emergency report. That's criminal. Jake's hands dropped to his sides. I want charges pressed. I want every second of this recorded and documented. You'll have it, Harper said firmly. We're arresting her today. Sure enough, by mine afternoon, the town had a new spectacle. Karen Wilford, being escorted from her Glenhaven home in handcuffs, screaming about abuse of power and disrespect for real leadership. Local reporters caught wind within. Ours, the footage spread fast. Karen's pearl earrings and plastic composure looked ridiculous next to flashing lights and handcuffs. Jake didn't gloat. He didn't post about it. But Aaron did share a quiet tweet with a photo of the forged permit. side by side with the security footage timestamps proving no one was ever threatened. The internet took care of the rest. Within a day, Karen was a meme. Permit Princess gets prosecuted trended. Influencers mocked her on TikTok. A parody account called @HOA Karen Weddings posted photoshopped ranch weddings with signs like now serving trespass tea, but Jake didn't care about the laughs. He was just relieved for now. Still, as Scout lay at his feet that evening and the sun sank behind the ridge, Jake felt a heaviness in his chest. Karen had been arrested, but what if that wasn't the end? He had a bad feeling. She had one last play. And this time, she wouldn't be coming through the front gate. Karen Wilford had been many things to the people of Glen Haven, planner, perfectionist, but now, she was something else. Entirely, a spectacle. The footage of her being handcuffed on her front porch, shouting about sovereign homeowner rights, had been uploaded by a neighbor's teenage son before the deputies even finished reading her the charges. Within hours, the video was viral first on the town's Facebook group, then on Reddit, and by midnight, Twitter X was ablaze with clips titled "Karen Tries to Seize a Ranch, Ends Up in Cuffs." Jake Monroe didn't ask for fame. He didn't want the spotlight, but it found him anyway. He first realized the scale of it when he went to the feed store the next morning and was greeted by a kid, holding his phone up to Jake's face with a huge grin. "You're the ranch guy, right? The one Karen tried to take?" Jake nodded warily. "That's me, dude. You're a legend. My mom watches your barn security cam footage like it's a soap opera." Jake gave a tight smile. It ain't fiction. When he got home, his inbox was flooded. Emails from reporters, vloggers, even a documentary producer claiming they wanted to do a piece on modern land rights and HOA tyranny. TikTok edits showed dramatic music playing over shots of Karen yelling and Jake standing his ground. His barn had been dubbed the line in the dirt. His son Tyler, who ran social media for the ranch's horse training side business, leaned into the chaos. "Dad, we've got 27,000 new followers on the ranch page," Tyler said, holding up his phone. "Sponsors are reaching out. Saddle makers, boot brands, even a barbecue sauce company wants you to endorse them." Jake rolled his eyes. "I'm not an influencer. I'm a rancher," Tyler grinned. "Not anymore. You're a ranch influencer." Online circus was surreal, but behind the memes and montages, something more serious was happening. Hannon had ignited a long overdue fire under Glen Haven's HOA. Board members who had previously nodded along with her wild proposals were now in damage control mode. HOA meetings turned into public confessionals. Neighbors came forward with stories Karen had used HOA funds for personal landscaping. She'd threatened elderly residents with fines for unsightly pumpkins. One man claimed she demanded he repaint his porch because the color didn't match her vision board. A quiet uprising began. Petitions were signed. Anonymous whistleblowers leaked years of HOA meeting transcripts, many of them exposing Karen's manipulative tactics. By the end of the week, the board voted to permanently remove her from all leadership roles. But Karen wasn't done. Even while awaiting her court date for filing a false police report and forging documents, she began sending out letters, some handwritten, others typed, claiming Jake had deceived the community, that he had stolen public land and exploited the town for internet clout. She mailed one to Jake directly. It arrived folded into an expensive cream-colored envelope. Inside was a single sentence. "You think this ends with handcuffs? I built this town, and I'll rebuild it with or without your permission." Jake tossed it into the fire pit without reading it twice. But Aaron took it seriously. "She's unraveling," Aaron said. "Desperation makes people unstable. She's been humiliated, but her ego won't let her accept it. We need to stay alert." That night, Jake added motion-triggered lights around his barn and installed another set of cameras, this time facing the road. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew it deep down. Karen wasn't just embarrassed, she was enraged. And when someone like her loses power, they start doing stupid, dangerous things to feel like they still matter. The calm was gone. A storm was coming. The wind changed that night. It wasn't just the chill or the scent of oncoming rain, it was something heavier, like the air itself was warning Jake to stay alert. Scout paced at the window, ears twitching. The motion-triggered lights around the barn had flicked on twice already, but each time Jake checked the monitors, nothing showed but swirling dust and darkness. Still, he didn't sleep. Just after 2 a.m., the third alarm triggered. Jake slid out of bed, pulled on his boots, and grabbed the shotgun he kept by the door, not because he wanted to use it, but because people like Karen were more dangerous when their pride turned into obsession. The gravel near the back pasture showed fresh tire marks, but what really set him off was the broken latch on his side gate. He moved silently across the field, sticking to shadows, eyes locked on the barn's silhouette. The front doors were slightly ajar, just enough to be wrong. Then he saw her. Karen, wearing black, hair tied back, standing in the middle of his barn with a large jug of something clutched in her arms. He stepped forward. "Don't do anything. You'll regret." Karen froze. Then, slowly, she turned. "It's funny," she said, voice flat and cold. "I used to think you were just stubborn, a little backward, but you made me into a joke." Jake didn't lower the gun. "You did that yourself. I gave this town identity," she snapped. I took a dying subdivision and made it the most desirable zip code in 3 counties. You think I won't fight for what's mine? He took a step closer. This isn't yours. It never was. Karen's hand trembled. She held up the jug. Jake realized what it was. Diesel. You want to burn it down? He asked quietly. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. Jake's heart pounded. His barn wasn't just a structure, it was history. His grandfather had raised that roof. His father had laid those beams. It was where he'd carved his brand into wood, where his son learned to saddle a horse, where his wife's favorite sunflowers bloomed just outside the doors. You burn this, Jake said. You don't just lose the fight. You lose everything. Karen stared at the floor like she was seeing her own reflection in the dirt. Her hands shook. Her breathing grew louder, more uneven. Then came the sirens. Red and blue lights danced across the barn walls. Sheriff Harwood's voice echoed through the darkness. Hands where I can see them. Karen dropped the jug. It hit the floor and rolled, the fuel sloshing inside. Deputies moved in fast. She didn't resist. Maybe because she'd finally realized how far she'd gone, or maybe because deep down, she knew it wasn't just about land anymore. It was about control, and she'd lost it. Jake stepped back as the sheriff approached. Caught her on the property, Jake said. This time, with fuel. Harwood gave a grim nod. We'll add attempted arson to the charges. Karen didn't speak as they cuffed her again, but her eyes locked with Jake's hand in them. He didn't see rage. He saw something worse. Resentment. Like even as the law took her away, she believed she was the victim. The barn was safe, but Jake knew the damage was deeper than scorched wood could ever show. Back in the house, Erin sat by the fireplace, reviewing the footage. She was going to burn your history to the ground, she said quietly. Jake stared out the window, jaw clenched. She already tried, he replied. She just failed. But in that moment, he also knew Karen's story wasn't quite done, and neither was his, not until the whole truth was exposed. 2 weeks passed after the barn incident. Karen Wilford was in county lockup awaiting trial, facing charges ranging from trespassing and document forgery to attempted arson. Her attorney requested a psychiatric evaluation. The HOA had stripped her name from every record. The pristine jewel of Glen Haven's at dark. Her Range Rover gone, her flower beds overgrown, and still, Jake felt no triumph, not because he pitied her, but because she had dragged so many people down with her. The town was split. Some still whispered that Jake had overreacted, that it was just a wedding, and Karen had been stressed. Others stood firm behind him, calling for Glen Haven to be restructured entirely. The chaos she'd created left scars on the whole community, and her absence was a gaping wound no one knew how to stitch. But the most awkward part? The wedding was still scheduled. Madison Wilford, Karen's daughter, had gone silent throughout the ordeal. Not a single public statement. No social media. She disappeared like smoke in the wind, until she showed up at Jake's ranch. Alone. Jake was out, back, tightening a saddle strap when he heard the footsteps. He looked up and saw her standing awkwardly near the barn, her mother's face softened by sorrow and necessitation. I'm not here to cause trouble, she said quickly. I'm here to apologize. Jake straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. You're not the one who needs to. Madison nodded. I know, but I let her run wild. I let her plan the wedding without oversight. I didn't even know she forged permits or lied about your land until I saw the footage online. Jake didn't speak. She looked up, her voice cracking. I called off the wedding. My fiancé and I, we both realized we were just going through the motions. Everything about it was her dream, not ours. Jake raised an eyebrow. So why come here? She stepped forward and pulled something from her bag, a folded piece of paper. My mother left this. I found it hidden behind her bathroom mirror. Jake took the page and unfolded it. At first glance it looked like another forged permit, but it wasn't. It was a handwritten map. One that showed not just his ranch, but multiple properties surrounding Glen Haven, each labeled wedding destination Phase 2, Phase 3, Phase 4. Jake's stomach dropped. She was planning more. Madison said quietly, my mom wasn't just trying to take your land. She wanted to create an entire wedding empire out here, her own Napa Valley. But for ceremonies, she'd been calling it the Glen Haven Dream. Jake let out a slow breath. It wasn't about Madison. It was never just about the wedding, it was about legacy, control, ownership. Karen hadn't wanted to use his ranch. She wanted to erase his name from it. You saved this from happening, Madison said. I just thought you should know how far it was going. Jake nodded, folding the map again. Thanks for bringing it. As she turned to leave, he called out, you ever think about still getting married? She hesitated. Maybe, but not like she wanted. Jake gave a rare smile. If you do, and you're still looking for a venue, I know a spot. Might not be fancy, but it's honest. She smiled. I'll think about it. A month later, Karen pled guilty. Her sentence included fines, community service, and a restraining order from Jake's property. The HOA voted to dissolve and reform, under new leadership, this time with public oversight. Jake never cashed in on the fame. He turned down the brand deals and documentary offers. But the next summer, a small, quiet wedding took place under the oak tree near his barn. Just 2 families, a sunset, and no drama. And when someone asked Jake if he'd ever sell his land now that it was famous, he just laughed. This land's been through storms, wildfires, and a woman named Karen, he said. If that didn't break it, nothing will. The end.